All right, so continuing to get through our backlog of Discord discussions this week, we have something from Seagoat 777, the one and only. Well, actually, I
The
guess
777th iteration of.
Seagoat. Yeah. Why isn't there a Seagoat race in D&D?
It's anyways.
So anyway, Seagoat writes, something I was pondering were tool proficiencies and languages in D&D. How often have players or DMs used language proficiencies in their D&D games? Never? Once per campaign? Every session? That's a pretty good question. I'll get to his comments on it in a second, but just initially, how often do you really focus on tool proficiencies?
Tools not as much, except when they're needed, because those are a very situational thing, but language also is a very situational thing. So for tool proficiencies, like I was just thinking the other day, Thieves Tools are including everything you need to pick a lock or disarm a trap. So you would use those in conjunction with, I believe, your like sleight of hand.
Okay.
I'd have to look up what Thieves Tools Kit does exactly. I don't know if you can use it in lieu of that or whatnot, but I've never really focused. Clearly, I don't know what, because I've never focused on it.
Right.
But, you would need that toolkit to do those things.
Mm-hmm.
Or I think without those, you'd be improvising. And I
Okay.
think you get a disadvantage. I'd have to look it up right now.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think that you could, like, I always felt like Thieves' Tools were supposed to be things like lockpicks.
Yeah.
You know, like stuff to actually break in or enter into areas that you are not supposed to be in.
Okay, hold on. A tool helps you do something you couldn't otherwise do, such as craft or repair an item, forge a document, or pick a lock. Proficiency with a tool allows you to add your proficiency bonus to any ability check you make using that tool.
Okay. All right. So, are they basically saying I can't do a thing unless I have the tools specific to it? Because I kind of feel like, a character, depending on what you're good at, maybe you could improvise something.
So I'll read the Thieves Tool one here. It's a set of Thieves tools. Includes a small file, set of lockpicks, small mirror mounted on a metal handle, set of narrow bladed scissors, pair of pliers. That's what it includes. Proficiency with these tools lets you add your proficiency bonus to any ability checks you make to disarm traps or open locks.
Okay, so you get your proficiency bonus.
Yeah.
By doing that, and so it doesn't exclude you from doing a thing.
Right. So I think in the case of like disarming a trap or opening locks, you would need your Thieves Tools, or you would probably get disadvantage and no proficiency bonus if you're using improvised lockpicks, maybe.
Yeah. I use a rock for a lockpick.
That's not
smash.
That's a lock break.
Still works.
But yeah, so I guess that's important if you're doing a campaign where you're paying attention to it. That could also be something people don't pay a lot of attention to, kind of like Encumbrance and carry weight and that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, Encumbrance is always annoying no matter what you're playing, because everybody wants to carry everything. It's always the reason why I appreciate it when you see games like Wasteland 3 was a good example of it, where they were like, yeah, there's just no carrying capacity. Just carry everything. Right. There's no chest or anything to hold stuff. And everyone was like, excellent. Perfect. I'll take it.
On the other side of that, languages are always situational. And I did comment on this as well in the chat. But if you're just anywhere civilized where people would know common, for instance.
Yeah.
Not a big deal. But perhaps you're in a city that is just like gnomes or just elves or dwarves. Like maybe you're under the mountain.
Right.
Maybe you're speaking to be able to only speak Dwarven, except for maybe traders who would know extra languages.
Okay. Yeah.
Or maybe you're out fighting orcs, a nomadic tribe of orcs.
Sure. That
They
works.
probably wouldn't know common.
Yeah.
And then goblins. Goblins tend to sometimes know common, but you could have them not.
Right.
So languages is definitely one of those things where it's like, all right, well, if you want to avoid a fight,
Yeah.
it's good to know other languages.
Sure.
Because then maybe those goblins that are screaming, just like that. That's what they sound like.
Yep. Great.
That's their new sound.
Maybe
that means, hello, friends. And what you're hearing is, what you assume is them trying and murder you.
Like it's
so then
Klingon.
Klingon. So then you murder the entire goblin village, but they really just wanted to greet you.
Yeah.
And now you're the asshole.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like in D&D, or in most games for that matter, you have to start asking yourself if you're the asshole.
Always.
Because you probably will be. But the thing that I always felt about languages was I always felt like they were kind of an afterthought. If you really look at them in practice for how D&D is built, any of the player races that you play, they're all like, well, they speak common and they speak these other things. I don't think I've seen a single one of the races that you can pick at the very beginning that doesn't by nature just speak common. So, and any of the additional languages are mostly situational to other characters that you would meet inside of the world, not to communicate inside of your own groups or in normal cities.
I think it would be really interesting if you had a party that was all within the same race or clan. Say you're a clan of half-orcs or a clan of half-elves, or maybe not a clan of half-elves, but like if you're just all elves or all dwarves, if you're all the same race or half race, like you could be elves and half elves, but you're on one town that is just this one race, essentially, not a melting pot.
Right.
So it's like, yeah, we're all elves, we're different elves, different classes, but we all speak elvish. That's it.
Right.
But then you have to wonder, would people that you come across speak elvish?
Yeah, I mean, if they're elves, probably, but you don't know.
Sure, other elves, half elves, probably.
Right.
Maybe some merchants and scholars, but outside of that, I think it'd be a fun thing to deal with, being like, all right, we don't know the local language.
Right. And considering how many languages there are, it would actually be kind of interesting if you had a party and there were a few characters that happen to know a specific language that doesn't come up very often. And so if they wanted to communicate something inside their own group that other people were not overhearing,
that's the thing you can absolutely do.
Yeah.
Like, if you had a party of all thieves.
Yes.
You could speak in Thieves' Cant, or Druidic if you're all druids.
Right.
But that's class specific.
Yeah, but there are backgrounds, because I remember I think I had a hermit background at one point. Or a scholar's background, I think, is another one. There's several that will actually say that you can take an optional language.
Yeah.
So at that point, if you took an optional language and other people in your party happen to take other languages, maybe you studied at the same place so that you have a specific language that you're familiar with, and you need to communicate stuff, in secret, assuming that other people don't know.
Maybe you all took Infernal at Strixhaven.
Oh, that's true. This would actually be really good for Strixhaven because maybe there's language courses and you're realizing I can't communicate with this whole other group that's around. Maybe there's language courses.
That would actually be interesting, yeah.
That would be fun. How long do you have to study the language in order to actually be able to speak that language?
Well, in the book, you can learn language in 250 days.
250 days? I would certainly.
That's what D&D has for learning in your off time.
Okay. I would certainly hope if you're in a school, it might go a little bit faster. If you're taking a specific course for that. But then again, in real life, it takes you many years, usually, to be proficient in a language. I remember Rembrandt was actually well, he would speak Common, and he also knew Aquan, technically, because he was a turtle.
Language of the Aqua folk.
Yeah, but the one that I took, because I could choose another one, he knew Dragon, basically. And the reason why I actually had the in-lore one was because he studied at Sunscale Temple, which was built on an old dragon mound. So they had all of the old lore from the book. So everybody that studied there ended up learning dragon from the text and everything that was there.
See, I have usually I also mention that too. Is I've definitely done cases where players may take a language such as Draconic that they learned from their class. Like a wizard would probably know Draconic because usually a lot of arcane spells are written in Draconic. However, they may not know it aside from what their spells are. They may not know it conversationally, but they can read it.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't be able to speak, like, sentences. They wouldn't be able to have, like, a conversation with you in Draconic.
Right.
Because it wouldn't make sense.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah, and I didn't really have a lot of opportunities to. As I'm thinking about it, too, we actually did encounter a dragon, like a frost dragon, I think a blue dragon maybe, or a white dragon, I believe. And I did not think to speak to it in Draconic. I
mean, a white dragon probably wouldn't talk to you. It'd probably just breathe frost on you.
I mean, it was not very communicative.
Yeah, no, they aren't.
It didn't like to talk. We did have
no white dragons don't.
But
blue dragons are lightning, by the way.
Oh, blue dragons are lightning. Oh, okay. I thought that those would be yellow dragons. Are there yellow dragons? There's golden dragons.
No, I don't think there's yellow. There might be yellow.
Maybe there's the thunder dragons.
Maybe. I can't remember. I could be wrong in that. I think one might be a cone of lightning and one might be a line of lightning, but I'm not sure.
Okay. Are there any water dragons?
Like, yeah, dragon turtles.
Oh, that's right. Those things are deadly.
Yeah, they breathe. Their breath weapon is steam.
Well,
steam is worse than like fire in a lot of cases.
Oh yeah, just ask a lobster.
No, I don't think I will.
No, there should be a lobsterkin.
I was just thinking that.
They'd speak
we got
one too.
Giant claw and another fine manipulative claw.
Yes, that you can use the fine manipulative claw as your thieves' tools.
You can be Crablante from One Punch Man.
Yeah.
From the first episode, the guy with the just wearing his underwear and giant crab claws.
Oh yeah, that's fine. I could literally be Krabby. If you play a Pokemon, you could be Krabby. Sea Goat writes here, just I'll go back to his comment. I've played a bit of D&D over the years, but not really used languages all that much, maybe once or twice a campaign. Magic is the get out for this, especially at higher levels. So who needs languages, right? I'm in a D&D game based on 9th century Europe, and have had to use my language proficiency every other session or thereabouts, which makes sense within the game. Where it doesn't make sense is in D&D, with all the varied races and cultures around the table. Having traveled extensively around the world, when you travel to a different country, those natives speak to each other in their own language, and all their personal material is written in their own language, which I don't readily understand. So why is it different in D&D? Should DMs make more use of languages in the game? I can kind of understand the idea of adventurers going to distant lands needing to be aware of languages. I'm just mostly trying to figure out if it starts to inhibit like the flow of the game if it's too heavily focused on.
Well, I think one way you get around that too is, aside from the magic portion, which he's absolutely right, you learn spells and you get innate abilities to read and speak languages beyond your own with several classes. You know, Warlock can just take an invocation that's like, I can read anything. Doesn't matter.
Sure.
You know, that's super handy. Like, it's like, take this and you never have to worry about it again.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if you had a setting of D&D that took place like Europe, where it's multiple countries or places that speak very different languages, it would be more important.
Right.
And either you'd have to know the language of your neighbors, for instance, which, you know, in a lot of places, like even Canada, they know, like Quebec,
Yeah, you
they
probably know
primarily
French.
know English and French,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So if it's your neighbors, but if you're going far away, it would be like, all right, do I know this language of Great Britain
Mm-hmm.
when I'm like somewhere far else? Like the Irish and the English obviously would know each other's languages kind of there, but like with the French necessarily, well, if they're trading with them, then perhaps, but if they're not trading, then maybe not. I think
Right.
then it comes down to you could implement translators in game.
Okay. Okay, that would be
So
a valuable skill.
if you wanted to, even not as a skill, but if you had to hire a translator,
Oh, okay.
you know, you could do that. You could be like, all right, this person is proficient, or you could be like, maybe they're a bad translator.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they don't actually know anything that the language is, and they're just conning you.
We got the Barkin basement translator.
Yeah. Maybe you're just getting conned. I think that would be an interesting hook.
Oh
Like you
yeah.
could go to a foreign country, hire a translator, and he's working with everyone just to con you.
You kind of go like, yeah. Well, we had a couple options for the translator we could get, and this one like costs like 100 gold, and this one costs 5 gold, and you're like, oh well, I want the deal, so I get the translator that costs 5 gold. But every interaction that you have when he tries to translate, he translates poorly, and ends up just getting you into constant fights with everyone you want to trade with.
Or they just lead you into a cartel that abducts you.
Yeah, that's a whole
Human
other.
trafficking.
Yeah, it's the exact kind of campaign.
Or elf trafficking.
Or elf trafficking, yes. Uh, that's totally the campaign everybody wants to get into. I would think though that with a campaign like if you were setting it in Europe or something like that, where you have a lot of countries right next to each other that all speak very different languages, you would assume that when you're actually building your characters themselves, you imagine that they probably do have multiple languages, just because if they're living in that area where that would be useful, they might know more languages than in other areas.
Yeah, I mean, in that specific context, I think it would be based on you'd have to have a background.
Yeah.
Like, build your background out. What did you do for school? What have you done? Kind of, why would you know this language is
Right.
a thing.
And I think there are some backgrounds that are like the more scholarly backgrounds where they will allow you to pick a few languages.
And I did answer in my thing too. I usually make my players have a reason for knowing lesser known languages.
Sure.
Like if you want to know Celestial, you had best be like a cleric or have a reason for it.
Well, and like I said, the reason why I could say that Rembrandt knew Draconic was because of where he studied and that he actually would have seen texts and been around people that were speaking it. I don't necessarily know if it makes a lot of sense, unless you're studying to be a translator in a game, to just suddenly say, yeah, I know how to talk to birds now, or whatever. I just know. Did you spend a lot of time around birds? No, but I've seen some. Okay, that's not really gonna work. That's not going to make for a very immersive experience.
Right.
And I do feel like Common, in terms of the language portion of this, is sort of an out, because so many same thing like night vision. Actually, Common is like used by everyone, and I feel like you need other versions of Common. So like you have English, but
that exists. In like the Forgotten Realms, there are multiple variants of Common.
Okay.
Based on region.
Okay, because I start thinking like we're in America, and technically we speak English as a primary, but really we speak American. Like we speak American. There's a lot that you wouldn't understand if you actually went to England.
You wouldn't understand.
No, and some of the dialects are gonna trip you up real easy. And you would not necessarily understand Gaelic or Celtic, even though they're on the same area. Totally different thing. So I don't know about that. Tool use, though. We'll go back to tool proficiencies for a minute. I always kind of figured that if you're a thief, they kind of give you thieves tools. If like there's a lot of character classes where they just kind of go, yeah, you have it. I've not seen a case where they're like, this is the class that you have, and you don't have the tools you need. You have to figure out what to do.
There are other tools than just class tools.
Okay.
There's like disguise kits, forgery kits, artisans tools for professions.
Okay, yeah, the artisan tool. I always thought disguise kits, though, were pretty typical of, like, bards, possibly, or, or rogues, depending on what class you're at. But I didn't think that I might have to, like, forage for them. I kind of figured that...
You might have to go buy one.
Might have to go buy one.
And some of these toolkits, I think, are limited use.
Oh.
Perhaps.
Okay. I mean, it would make more sense if they were limited use. I don't think, like, Thieves Tools usually have that built in.
I mean, not unless you break them. If you critically fail several times, like a couple times with lockpicks or with disarming stuff, you might have your lockpicks broken, for instance. I would do that.
Sure.
Like, oh yeah, you critically failed on that chest and you broke a lockpick.
Yep. And so you might need to replace that. Or do something. You probably have
you have a set of lockpicks. I'd assume it's like 5 to 10.
Yeah, because you need certain types. You need your rakes and you need your pressure plates. Your little tension
rods.
Tension rods, yeah. Now, I did not have Thieves Tools, but I did have a kit, and I think that this is why I'm not sure if tool use is all that useful in most games, but I had an Herbalist Kit, and the thing about it is that when you actually look into what the Herbalist Kit is supposed to have, it will mostly help you make, like, potions, but it does take you a while to make said potions, and I can't tell you that I ever actually had a reason to use it. I did try to justify my ability to try and stabilize someone who was on a battlefield, because I had the Herbalist Kit, but honestly, that doesn't really work. The Herbalist Kit is not built for that.
No.
But had I known, I probably from the start would have said, as I'm going along, when I don't have to take my long rests because I'm a monk, I will work on making potions so that I can pass that out, because that's kind of what the Herbalist Kit is for. But I never used it, and I never really had much use for it. So I just never interacted with it. It was in my kit. I had that, and also I had a dragon chest set for reasons.
Which you never used?
I also never used it. I never had to.
That's for, like, if you want to do, like, social interaction with, like, a game set, I feel. Or if you want to gamble with your game set.
Oh, yeah. And I still don't actually know what the rules of dragon chess were. Or if
I don't think there's
no
rules. I don't think there's rules.
They didn't. They just
put. It's just a skill check.
They put a dragon in front of chess and said, "That sounds good."
Yeah.
Do that. So, do you think that DMs should make more use of things like languages and tool use in games?
I think it's situational, depending on what your focus is on the game. If it doesn't make sense to put more emphasis on that, or if it would slow the game down, then don't do it. But if it would be thematic, if it would make sense, and if it would be interesting for the game, then go for it.
Okay. I'm gonna say that for me, most of the time, it will probably slow down a lot of interactions, so I don't know how much I would use it as a mechanic in a game. The only real reason is because I usually like my games fairly mechanics light, when I'm playing. It's the same reason why I'm not a big fan of, like, the, how I need certain things in order to cast a spell. I need, like, a small piece of carrot and all of that. I don't want to deal with that crap. I don't want to figure out if I have the piece of wool and this.
Yeah,
and this
I was
twig and
explaining
branch.
that
Yeah.
the other day when we had been making the cleric. Is that, a lot of spells will have material components, but generally speaking in games, unless it takes something that is like more than several gold pieces worth of equipment, if it's a diamond, you need to have that. But like most games I've played in don't really keep track of that, but you can also offset it with your arcane or divine focus or your druidic focus.
Sure.
Or with a spell component pouch, you can be assumed to have basic components for things.
Right.
So like unless you're using stuff that you have to actually get, like diamonds or anything that would cost more than say a gold piece typically, you would need the component for.
Right. And I found that what we usually did with spells is simply say, assume that you know what your spells require and that you have a pouch that would have those kinds of materials in it as typical. Then I found out that I didn't even have to worry about that because I was a monk. So I just use key points. And so that's totally pointless to even worry about the material components. Languages, most of the time, unless it's specific to a scenario, like if it's specific to the campaign or the mission that you're on, I wouldn't worry too much about it. Tool use is not typically something that comes up. Unless
maybe you just need to use your tools more.
Maybe you do, or maybe you should be more aware of the kinds of tools that you have if it is something that comes up more situationally. Like, for instance, if you're a thief, you probably want to be very aware that you have a Thieves Tool kit, that you want to have a Thieves Kit on you, and that you might want to have a Disguise Kit because chances are you're going to be in more situations where those things are going to happen. And I don't really fault anyone for having, like, a crafting kit, but being aware of what you can actually do with that kit is very useful. If I had known that the Herbalist Kit was as useful as it was, I probably would have used it more. And I didn't at all. Wait, I could have been making potions this whole time?
And antitoxins.
I could have been making antitoxins this whole time, and I didn't. And no one in my party, I think, even knew that I had an Herbalist Kit. Until the point where somebody's dying, and I was like, oh, crap, this would have been a really good time to have a potion I could have been making this whole time. Whoops. So, I can understand the reasons why they're there, but for me, just because I want to try and streamline things usually, if I'm running or playing a game, I try not to think too much about those deeper, more in-the-weeds mechanics. Like languages and tool. You know what you get? Is you get one of those little translator apps on the magic phone that you have in the game.
There you go.
And you just have it translate all the languages and then also explain to you how to, make kits. Or you buy it on the fantasy version of Amazon. Oh, Fantasy Costco. I'm going to go straight to the Adventure Zone reference there.
There you go.
You just go to the Fantasy Costco and get it in between sessions. There you go. But anyway, we are continuing to have that conversation over in our Discord. And so if anyone is out there and would like to chime in or has a similar subject that you'd like to discuss, please visit us over on Discord.
There you go. I think you need a translator for that one.
I do. We need to translate from Common to Nathan and back. You know what it is? Is that there's a language for Total Pebble Knockdown, but it's just whatever language you speak, but you put rocks in your mouth when you say.
We call it Pebbleese.
Yeah, exactly. And if you speak Pebbleese, that's fine. You can use that over on the channel. Thanks for that.